this is a quick video on how to calculate standard deviation using a blank version of table 2.6 from your book. Again, I'm using table 2.6 from your book. I have taken out the spots that you are going to use to run this calculation to show you how to set up a table like this for calculating standard deviation in one of the exercises. So you'll see the table includes respondent on the left column and 1 to 11, and then the second column is democratic rating. So for each of the respondents in the left column, we have a number that tells you the value for that particular variable. It's not really important what the value means because we're just trying to calculate right now standard deviation. So step 1 from the book to calculate standard deviation is to first calculate each value's deviation from the mean. You are actually given the mean in table 2.6 in the book, but if you were not, you would simply add up all these numbers, divide by 11 to get the mean. So I'm going to do that really quickly to show you what that looks like, because you will have to calculate the mean first when you are doing a standard deviation calculation for one of the exercises. So we've got 638 divided by 11. The mean value of democratic rating for these 11 people is 58. And again, you were given that information already. So once you have the mean, to calculate each value's deviation from the mean, all you do is take the value for each respondent or case in your data and you subtract the mean. So I subtract here 20 minus 58 equals negative 38. 20 minus 58 equals, 22 is the second value, minus 58 equals negative 36. And I told you in class, and I'll remind you again here, keep your negative. I'll show you why in a moment. It's always good to show your work. It's actually required in the exercise. So 66 minus 58, 82 minus 58, 24, 94 minus 58. There is a pattern to this data. That's not always going to be the case. So this data, this table gives you a nice easy pattern. So you can see now that you have the value from step 1 of the deviation from the mean for each of the values, you can then add those up. I'll give you a little secret. This is always going to be 0. You should add this up on your own to double check your math. If the sum of your deviations from the mean is not 0, you did something wrong. There's a bad calculation. Because mathematically, you are figuring out the deviation from the mean from the same group of data, so it always has to be 0. So step 2 in calculating your standard deviation is to square each deviation. So all you do is take the deviation from the mean for each respondent and then square it. So negative 38 squared, and then I do my calculation, 1,444. So I don't need to write this out because you're squaring the same number. So 36 times 36, 1296. Since I'm just using my phone here, I actually don't know if there's a square button on the iPhone's calculator, so I'm just gonna do this by hand. And I'm moving fast because I already saw the pattern in the data. But again, that will not always be the case. But they gave us a nice pattern to show you how to calculate standard deviation. So now we're done with step 2. So step 2 is to do the square. This was step 1. So once we have step 1 and step 2 done, step 3 is to sum the squared deviations. So step 3 has us sum the squared deviations. So all we do is add up all of these numbers of the deviation squared for each value. Oops. Okay, my Apple calculator is not cooperating as they are wont to do. So again, here I'm adding up the squared deviations for each of the values. And I come up with 6,768. So that's step 3. That is your sum of squares. So again, step 3, the sum of squares is the sum of the deviations for each value squared. So once we have the sum of squares, we now divide the sum of the squared deviations. So step 4, I'll put out here. So step 4, you divide the sum of squared deviations, 6,768, over n minus 1. In this case, n minus 1, the n is the number of respondents. We have 11 respondents, so we divide 6,768 by 11 minus 1. Oops. So 6,768 divided by 10 equals 676.8. This is our variance. So step 4 is variance. This is the degree to which there is variance, or it's the measure of the difference in your data set. So if everybody had the same democratic rating, there would be no variance. But this variance captures the difference in the range of data from 22 to 96, and the variance is how you figure out standard deviation in step 5, where you take the square root of variance. So step 5 is the square root of variance. And my Apple phone calculator is not going to be able to calculate that. So here's where you could move over to your computer's calculator or use a better calculator than the one on your iPhone. So step 5 again is the square root of variance, which is your standard deviation. So my standard deviation for this set of data is 26.02.